There you go.
All right, so let's set the stage for this. Back in the 80s, during the significant downturn that all of us in this room lived through, Lord Browne was the chairman of British Petroleum, and Lord Browne set some very aggressive profit goals for his managers, and the only way they could be met was to cut costs. And that's what they did. So the result of that is in 2005, the Texas City refinery explosion killed 15 people and injured 180. OSHA claimed BP had a systemic safety problem and fined them $87 million. In 2007, BP had a legacy pipeline that leaked 4,700 barrels of oil in a wilderness area, and the investigation that came right after it found out that BP knew they had a corrosion problem and didn't do anything about it. $16 million in fines. Now, after these things, James Baker, who was a senator, one of the people in charge of these multiple investigations, said BP places profit before safety. In 2009, there was a major natural gas leak in Alaska at their central facility. They didn't even detect for quite some time. And in 2010, the Center for Public Integrity claimed that 97% of all OSHA fines went to BP. All right, so how big was the blowout? Well, this is kind of a sad roster, really, of blowouts. But they're not all blowouts. Look at the first one. This is the first Gulf War. This is an act of war. This is where Saddam Hussein's troops retreating out of Kuwait blew up every oil well they could find and left that country burning under a huge cloud of black smoke. Now, I'm not sure exactly how you could ever estimate that, but the estimate is 11.4 million barrels of oil. And before I leave this one, just to beat our own drum just a second, anybody who thought they could put out an oil well fire, they went to Kuwait. We're going to get the kingdom to pay us to put out that fire. But the vast majority of the oil well fires were put out by the people who knew their business. Boots and Coots, Red Adair, Wild Well Control, American companies. We're the reason those things got snuffed out in the short order, really, that they did. Okay, the old Lakeview Gusher, I'm not sure it should even be on this map. It's a 1909, and heck, in 1909, that's how you knew it was good, right? Blowout, we hit it big. So that was 9.3 million barrels. But finally, we get down to one a little more modern. Here's the Ixtoc blowout down in the Bay of Campeche that raged for about 9 months. It was a relatively shallow well. Pemex was making a trip. They swabbed the well in. When they realized they were in trouble, they closed the blowout preventers. The drill collars are in the way, and we all know how that ended. So that was a 3.6 million barrel estimate. Now the Macondo blowout finally shows up here at number 4, 3.2 million. Now that is a number that the courts picked. So the courts are sitting here trying to figure out whether the lowball estimate that BP wants is right, or whether the higher estimate that the feds have come up with is right. So you know what they did. They split the baby. This is about halfway in between those two estimates. Is it right? Probably not. But they're all estimates anyway. So 3.2 million barrels. This is what the fines were levied against. That's why BP was fighting this so hard. They knew that there would be fines associated with every barrel that was calculated. Okay, then we've got Uzbekistan and Russia. That's a kind of a, well, it's not real old, 1992, 2.2 million. And then almost all the rest of this stuff are tanker accidents. You don't hear about tanker accidents so much anymore because the Exxon Valdez ushered in the requirements for double-hulled vessels, and that really helped. But most of the rest of this stuff is just tanker accidents. So I think we're going to hold in here at number 4. Go ahead. All right, so here's the problem. Here's the completion problem that BP was faced with. They had set 9 7/8 inch, it was actually a liner, at 17,168 feet, and they were drilling deeper. Now this well was programmed to go deeper than it went, but look what they uncovered. Well, here's a 9-foot saltwater sand, 14.1 pound per gallon pore pressure. That's what they expected. If you looked at the mud window for this well, pore pressures are going up with depth. That's what everybody believes should happen. They got a little 3-foot oil sand in here, not too much to speak of. A slightly smaller pore pressure, but then look what happened to them. They drilled 3 very significant oil sands, and they're all subnormally pressured. They're all 12.6. They're not 14.1. They're not 14.5. How'd that happen? Well, I'm not sure I know, but Mother or Father Nature, depending on your point of view, can throw us some weird tricks from time to time. Here's one of them. So when they got through these sands, they drilled them. Right down here at the bottom of where they finally finished the well, they had a massive lost circulation event. They were drilling with 14.5 pound per gallon mud. These sands were 12.6. And the mud, of course, that they're losing is the frightfully expensive synthetic oil-based mud. So they stopped drilling, they cut their mud weight. That, more than anything else, helped fix the problem. They probably circulated a little lost circulation material, but they got the well back under control. But they cut their mud weight to 14.1, and that seemed to allow them to regain control of the well, but they knew they were through. We're just not going to be able to go any deeper, even if we set some casing down to here. We just don't have a big enough hole left anymore. So they decided that these sands were good enough, and they did some fairly extensive evaluation of these sands, as you certainly would do offshore with a prospect this expensive. So they knew all about these oil sands. They were good ones, they're keepers, so we're going to run pipe and we're going to cement this thing. All right, so here's the plan. They decided to run a long string of 7-inch. Now we can debate whether that was a good idea or not later. That's what they chose, a full long string of 7-inch. And here are the sands that they're going to try to complete. Here's their stray water sand up here. And here's the cementing program. Now remember, they just got through with this massive lost circulation event. They don't want to invite that back. So they're trying to keep the cement slurry as light as possible. All right, so here's the plan. I'm going to pump a segment of what I call the good stuff. This is just good old Class H up here. That's going to be the top slurry. That's the slurry I mix and pump first. So when I finish circulating, it's up here on top. That's a cap. Underneath that, they're going to pump some nitrified foam cement. We'll talk about why that may not have been the best choice here in a second. And then chasing the nitrified foam cement to bottom is some more of the good stuff. Here's some Class H, and the Class H is designed to stay inside the pipe. This is going to stay inside my float joints. This is going to be a good solid piece of cement that even if I have flaws in the foam, should prevent any backflow of reservoir fluids. And then of course we all know they also had a float collar and a float shoe in here. That should have also helped prevent any backflow. So this was the plan. Go ahead. All right, here's the problem with this. They wanted that foam cement, when it got to the bottom of the well, to be 14.1 pounds per gallon. Now, the only way you can make it be that at the bottom hole pressure and temperature is to make it super light at the surface, because that nitrogen is going to be compressed as it moves to the bottom of the well. So to make this 14.5 pound per gallon nitrogen slurry at the bottom, it had to be 66% nitrogen at the mixing pumps, which meant that the slurry is only 6 pounds per gallon. All right, so this is really light stuff at the surface. All right, go to the next slide. What are they chasing it with? Well, I'm chasing it with the good stuff. This is 16.7 pound per gallon Class H. Now, when you put these two slurries in intimate contact, what's going to happen?
The
Heavier stuff's going to fall right through the light stuff. It's going to be all mixed up. I'm not going to have the heavy tail slurry at the bottom of the well any longer. Okay, go to the next one. And here's what that looks like. Here's the good stuff. There's the cap cement. Here's the foam. And now I got more foam mixed in here in the shoe joint. All right, so go one more. All right, now this is a strength test. This is the strength of the cement if it sets. Now the good stuff, okay, it does what good stuff does. It develops lots of compressive strength, somewhere between 25 and 3250 psi. That's a lot of compressive strength. The foam, because it is foam, has a lot of nitrogen in it. It never develops any strength like that. Looks like the best it might do is something a little better than 1000 psi, no matter how long you let it cook. Well, that doesn't sound too good in a reservoir that's got 12,000 psi in it, does it? All right, but then it gets worse. When they start testing the integrity of the well, they do that after 16 hours. There's 16 hours. So the strength of this solid should have been around 1000 psi, and that, interestingly enough, is the pressure gradient they intended to put across it during the test. Is this stuff going to stay good? Of course not. Okay, go to the next slide. Now, there are lots of alternative cement slurries out there. They didn't have to use the foam. They use the foam for reasons known only to them. Halliburton gets thrown under the bus for this. Halliburton is happy to sell you as complicated a cement slurry as you want to buy. It's the operator's responsibility. If you didn't think that slurry was good, why'd you pump it? Don't know the answer to that. Okay, go to the next one. So here's the pathway in. The pathway in is coming out of the reservoir through a flawed cement job, through the flawed weak slurry that's in the shoe joint, and then, to make matters even more insane, the float equipment all had to fail. The guide shoe, the float collar, all of those things failed. Now the pathway is up the inside of the casing towards the surface. So complex systems fail in complex ways. The cement failed, the float equipment failed. All of this had to fail, or there's no pathway to the surface. Okay, go ahead. All right, now we're going to test this. So this is where the negative test shows up. Now the negative test is on purpose reducing the pressure in the well below the pressure of the reservoir. And if there's no leak pathway, well, that's okay, nothing happens. Now the way you do that in a well like this, the blowout preventers are at the ocean floor, and they're connected back to the vessel with a long marine riser. So you close the blowout preventers down